Hey, folks, welcome to the Sunday night hanging right here on Sundays with me, Ben. And tonight we have my good friend Jppagetoo from the chat, also known as Jim, to the fellow water buffaloites and such, which I see a slew of them in the chat. And we're going to be talking amps, specifically tube amps, because there's other kinds of amps, apparently, but I don't know.
I think I'm causing an echo, so let me grab my ear.
Sounds like a plan. I'll read off our lovely chat in the house. Who do we have here? We have BC Rich 581, Third Burfel, good to see you, Hip Metalworks, Rob Baker, Doug Santaniello, Doug, Octopus Ears, excuse me, landed in LA, nice. Gary Davlin, superfan Gary Davlin, John Duchesne, Dan of New Jersey, Dave Chase, Ty Hub, good to see you, Ty, fellow Canuck, originally from Kingston. Now he's out in BC. That's fine. That's what we all do. We all end up out there. Well, except for me. Symmetry, he's out there. Hip Metalworks, he's out there. Who else do we have here? My Knees Hurt, awesome. Paul McNary and the Cats. Royal City Wreckers, more BC content, all the BC content. Presley, California Customs. Jeff K. Who else do we have here? T. Ricky's here. LRM Guitars. Thomas Santiago hanging out with Philip Aspie. 2 for 1 on the singing tonight. Lawrence Cash. Guitar Man 45. Dennis Ellis. Billy Baloney. Ryan Hall traveling to Alabama to see Mama. Give her a hug. Tom Raines. Jason Lindholm. Yeah. Nice. And, hey, Riku B. I will say, going forward for the next while, folks, River Docs, he's here for a bit. Awesome. I may be blurrier than usual because normally my father doesn't use the internet while I use the internet. And for various reasons, he needs to maintain contact other than, say, stomping on the floor, which I will hear. So, yeah. Hey, Paul Ewing. So, yeah, keep that in mind, folks. Those who know. And yeah. So, anyways, let's talk some amplifiers. Yeah, so if you have any questions, folks. Exactly, my knees hurt. Yeah, if you have any questions regarding amps, ask. That's what we're here for. Well, me. I facilitate. I get the experts on to help.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yep, I don't have an echo anymore, so.
Awesome. Hey, Terry's 3Gs and James Hawking. 49 people watching. Nice.
I did research your question on Pete's question.
I was going to say, let's get right into Pete Thorne had a question for tonight's show, but he couldn't be here because he's busy. So he asked in advance on Wednesday night when he was on, because you can do that. That's one of the advantages of appearing on the channel, folks. I'm just saying. You can ask questions, and as long as we remember them. But he was asking, we're been led to be known that Dumble amplifiers even, one of the mods that Dumble would do would be to add what would you call it, a FET stage? Because it's another stage. Well, he's at an FET somewhere. When a FET's some form of solid state, which is not quite the same as digital. It's hybrid, but it's a solid state gain stage. And we were curious.
Did he put it right to a transistor and how it's made? It doesn't work quite the same way, but it's very similar.
Thank you. Yes.
It's actually very tube-like in how it behaves.
Okay. That explains why the FET-based overdrive pedals sound so good, probably.
Yeah. And, an FET, the one thing it doesn't do is consume current. So it's a very high impedance input device, just like a tube is.
Mm-hmm. That explains why Lawrence runs 6 of them at 24 volts in his 87 pedal.
That could be. I haven't seen any of the schematics of that, and all I know is it sounds great.
Okay, right? That's my opinion. I'm like, I don't know how it sounds. I don't know how he does it, but it does. So, yeah. So Pete's question was like, was it right in the front? Did he hide it somewhere in amongst stages? So we
So what he
know.
did is he used that to create a 2-channel amp.
Okay.
They were generally associated with the overdrive amp that he built.
Mm-hmm.
What he did is he had 2 inputs. One input went through the FET and one input didn't. So it added an extra gain stage. And the reason they believe he did it, nobody knows for sure because he never really commented on it, was for certain artists who used piezo guitars, like Ovation guitars,
Mm-hmm.
or for instruments that had very low gain, that the output was really low. So the
Mm-hmm.
FET added an extra stage in there that gave them enough lift to get up over the noise floor quickly enough to keep the amp sounding good.
Okay. Interesting.
So
And
when I
that.
initially thought about it, I thought he was doing it as a mic stage, so for a singer songwriter to use to plug their microphone into, but that's
Right.
not why he did it.
Hmm.
So
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
it was at the very front of the amp, before the very first tube, as an extra gain stage, but it could be bypassed by going in the other channel of the amp.
Right. Okay. So similar. Yeah. So similar to like the Jose mod where he actually added a tube right in the front.
Yeah, the reason they did that is because Marshall left one of the triodes unused in
Oh,
the 12AX7. A
really?
12AX7 has 2 triodes in it, and one of them wasn't used. So what Jose did was grab a hold of that and put another gain stage in there.
Mazel. Yeah. Yeah. I see all the BC chatter in there, folks. What's up, Gretch Zeppelin? Good to see.
Need to move this over here so I can see the chat too, because I
Well,
can't see the
yeah, hey, that's I recommend it. Hey, Jim.
if I watch the show broadcast, it's lagged, so
Right.
it drive me insane. So I gotta watch the backstage view in order to not
Try having co-hosts with more bandwidth than you that they see the chat comments before I do by up to 15 seconds. They're like, "Oh, that's an interesting comment." I'm like, "Where?" I don't see it. But then it appears. Yeah.
So one of the
Hey,
things
Modern Vintage made it. Awesome.
I wanted to comment on tonight is, one of the things people always talk about is EL34s and 6L6s and whatnot, and what is the difference between them, and why do we have all these different tubes? So
Yeah, but which you know what? I'm just going to state it from the idiot standpoint in a way, and it would be like because traditionally it seems like 6L6, 6V6. We'll see the sixes are American, the ELs being British, and it might be well,
they
does
are
one work better with 120 and one works better with 220? Like that would be my initial thinking because I know circuitry is different, but then they sell them over here and there, so that doesn't make sense.
believe it
But
or not, they were invented by the same company.
of course they were. Sup, Sir Lawrence? We were talking about you a few minutes ago when Fets came up in conversation. You're the king of the Fets. I'm just saying it. You're the Boba Fetts of Fets.
We were looking into how the Dumble used them because Pete wondered if he used the FET as an additional gain stage up front or further into the amp. It's at front.
Ooh, we do have a question.
What's that?
LRM asks. We'll get back to the tube diversity,
Sure.
but should vintage amp caps be replaced if they are within range and are not leaking?
I don't. I believe the less you do to an amp, just leave it alone. If they're not leaking and the caps are still good, I leave them.
Right. That's the way I see it. You don't replace the brakes on your car till they need to be replaced.
I can say that I'm kind of in the minority on that. If you go out to a lot of the amp forums, the first thing they say, "Oh, you got to get those old electrolytic caps out of there, or they're going to go and they're going to take out your transformer and all that." That's hardly how they go. It's rare to have them explode, especially vintage versions. What typically happens is they develop a leak and they start letting a little bit of the AC through, and you start getting that sour note ghosting, that's when you know they need to be replaced.
Gotcha.
So I still, in my Fender, my 60 Fender, I still have all the original electrolytics in it. I've had them all
Right.
checked. They work great. I
Yeah.
replace them.
And Lawrence basically just confirmed what you had said. So I'm like, you know what? There's two of the smarter amp people I know. So exactly.
So,
There we are.
it depends on what you're going to use the amp for, too. If you're going to go take it out on tour and you can't risk it going down, that's a reason to replace them. But if you're
Yeah,
like a guy
exactly.
like me who's got a beautiful old amp sitting off to the side, you fire up every couple weeks and enjoy, there's
Mm-hmm.
no reason to do anything to it.
That's the way I see it, and especially if you're not constantly pushing it all the time. Like I said, travel as much as turning them on and off, wears on them. Just the vibrations of travel and stuff
Oh,
like
yeah.
that.
Plus that, when you got a show to do, you can't have an amp go down.
No,
A lot of bands don't have backups.
no.
So you nowadays you'd use something like a Helix or something as your backup and just
Yeah,
run straight to the
something
board.
that you can go. Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
directly in front of house.
But in years
Welcome to
past,
all you
you didn't
guys
have that.
joining in. We got a whole bunch more people jumping in, which is awesome. Welcome everybody. So back to basic. We'll call it the ELs versus the sixes. The differences.
Okay, the original pentode, which means it has um, five different elements inside it, was developed by a British company, Mullard, and they held a patent on it. And in order for other tube companies to manufacture pentodes, which are a very, very high output device, if you're
Mm-hmm.
running a power pentode, they charged a lot of money for you to be able to use their patents. Meanwhile, um, Mullard Osram and two scientists that were also working in that same area, and they created what they call the beam power tetrode, which instead of having another grid element, actually used some plates around the outside of the tube elements to force the electrons to the plate and to stay at the plate instead of bouncing back off it. So it's a completely different technology. The thing is, it takes a very precision manufacturing process to do that. And Muller didn't feel that they could do that with the machines they had in the 1930s and produce that tube economically. So they passed it on to Philips
Mm-hmm.
in the United States, who didn't want to pay all the patents, and they developed the technology, and it became actually an excellent technology because it's a more efficient tube. For the
Mm-hmm.
same power consumption, it puts out more power.
Sweet.
So 6L6s became the American tube, and the EL34 was the British tube until all the patents ran out. And then everybody realized that the 6L6 style tube was much better. That's where you get the KT tubes coming in on the British side.
Okay.
KT88, KT66. What KT stands for is kinkless tetrode, which is
Ah.
a beam power tetrode made so that it doesn't have the low power kink. I'm not going to get deep into the weeds explaining all that, but they're two
Mm-hmm.
different competing technologies that basically achieve the same thing in different ways. One's more efficient. One also sounds better. The power tetrode has a lower distortion characteristic, so it made a much louder sound with less undesirable distortion. So it eventually took over. As a matter of
Mm-hmm.
fact, nowadays when you buy an EL34, you're getting a beam power tetrode. They don't make power pentodes anymore.
Hmm.
They're just uneconomical to manufacture. The technology's there to build them all as beam tetrodes, and so what you're really getting is a tetrode. They just build it to the specs of an EL34 so that it functions the same.
Nice. I like the fact that with the delayed chat, it's like you're telling me this information, and Lawrence is just like basically going, "Yep," because he's just confirming with the same information in the chat. So I like that. Hello, Eddie Van Haskell. He says, "Hello, Ben. Hello, Chapman Room. Hello, everyone in Newfoundland and Labrador. Hello, all people from USA."
So
We have a
the whole thing of liking EL34s over 6L6s, and people saying, "Oh, I prefer a power pento," they just don't know what they're talking about. To me, they do sound different because they're different tubes, but they're still the same technology.
okay. We have another question from Janice. I'm not even going to. Chichinowski? No, that can't be right. But I tried. Janice asks, or Jans, I think it's Janice. Hi, I would like to record my Marshall Origin 20 head with simulated output at home. Okay. Can I set Power Soak PS1 Bugera to 0 volume, and whether this setting has no negative effect on the power amp? Thanks.
Set the power. I've never used the Bugera with a power soak in it, so I don't know what that means. I know that I have a Marshall, not a Marshall, a Gibson power soak.
What's up, Martin?
What's that?
Oh, I was saying hello to Martin from L&M Guitar Corner.
I have a Gibson power soak, which is basically a THD hot plate that was branded under Gibson. And it has a setting that actually allows me to not put out anything to the speakers. And it has a mic hookup that can go directly in. So depending on how your power soak or whatever you're using to quiet down the amp is set up, yes, you can run without any speaker volume.
Because that's what it sounds like to me. That device is like almost like a second master volume in many ways.
Yeah.
So in theory, yes.
But without, I don't. There's so many amps and stuff. I don't know how the Bugera is set up, but
that's
I would imagine
an
that it has
question.
a 0 output option.
Modern Vintage says, does anyone else care more about tube feel rather than tone?
What do you mean tube feel?
I like tube warmth, if that makes sense. Because I was like, I use my tube amps as pedal platforms, but there is something about, like, I hear a difference, going from solid state to tube with the same pedals, definitely. Even if they're, in theory, voiced the same or similar, it's different. Solid state's it's a little harder edges, They haven't rounded off the edge of the fretboard yet. That's what the tubes do. They round off the edges, I find.
Tubes have a natural compression that that transistors don't have. They have a second order harmonic that goes through them that's very pleasing to our ears. And that's why I think a lot of people really like tube amps, is because the distortion they produce is something that we're used to and something that our brains like for some reason.
I agree. Hello to Josh and Randy. And Martin was just on his phone on his way to bed. He said, well, it is after 2 a.m. There's Charles. He's been busy with the fabric today, folks. So Ferd's happy, though, because he has more of a Texas connection in the chat. He was worried about all these BC folks coming in here. Imagine that on a Canadian channel, Ferd. Who knew, right? Let's see here. Lawrence comments, the lower the voltage, the more curved the load lines become.
Yes.
Well, there we go. All right. And Terry's comment, the Bugera item appears to be a power soak / hot plate type situation.
Yeah. My hot plate has, if you look at the back, it has an output for running lines right to your PA system. And you can turn it all the way off so there's no output to a speaker. It acts as a complete load for the amp.
Of course you will, Martin.
The thing you got to be careful of is you cannot run a tube amp without a load. It has to have a speaker load. Otherwise, you're going to fry your output transformer, which is where all the money is in amps. Transformers are what cost money.
Dennis Ellis brings up a comment, and I can't disagree. He says, "For me, the older I get, the more I like light gear." Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but sometimes you just want to play that heavy gear that sounds good and it's loud.
That's right. Dean's out of Virginia. Nice. I love Virginia. Beautiful part of the country.
Symmetry, I kind of agree that tubes have kind of a warmth and an organic sound to them that you just don't get out of transistors. I think in the 60s, when they started making the first solid state amps, they tried to use tubes in place of transistors. I think that was a mistake. They certainly weren't ready for the power that they were dealing with at that time. That's why they blew them up so badly. But I think the new approach of using more complex circuitry to model amps and model the circuitry is a much better approach to using transistors to replacing tube amps. The modern helixes and the quad cores and the XFX and all that's where transistors are going to replace tube amps.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah, because if you can get that sound virtually and then just use it to make the physical get out there-ness and loudness, yes. Michael B. Live.
It just wasn't in the 60s. It wasn't ready. I mean, we didn't have any integrated circuits back then to speak of. I mean, there were some real small ones, but I mean, the first op amps were the 741 in the late 60s and early 70s, and those were terribly and woefully inadequate for audio processing. And we had absolutely no CPUs available until the mid 70s. So it really wasn't until the late 80s that it became even possible to start thinking about using modeling in computers to reproduce amps.
Right.
And then we didn't have the horsepower until probably around 2010.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Horsepower that you could afford. I mean, if you could have got a Cray or something back in the 70s, you probably could have done it, but not many people could afford $300 million for their replace their tube amp. And it was a little heavier, took up a good sized room.
Now, Scott Brockway comments, he says, and Scott, he has his opinions, so I listen to him. He says, Lawrence's Marshall pedals really do sound almost exactly the same, which is interesting. I know. I don't know how he does it. Magic. I don't know.
Well, Lawrence is here. Let him explain it.
Yeah. What's up, Cousin Doug?
How you doing it, Lawrence? Give us the lowdown on that.
Yeah, I think it seems to me he uses like 6 FATs in the 87 and runs them up to 24 volts, and that does something. I don't know what it does, but it makes them good.
Well, like I said, FETs are the most tube-like of transistors there are.
Mm-hmm.
They have a high impedance. They do a lot of the same things that a tube does, but they do it with solid state.
Yeah.
Modern
Vintage says, should we discuss how there are the real RCA EL34s with octagons and the non-RCA versions with other shapes, dots, etc.?
Tube rolling. I never have gotten into the whole concept that you got to have, the long plate gray vintage 12AX7s to set my amp to sound great. No. Most of them, if you actually put it in a double blind test, couldn't tell you the difference between any two tubes. They might tell you there's a difference, but they couldn't tell you which one's which.
It looks like Michael B's getting ready. He's been getting really great results with modeling, ditching all the analog gear, almost done. You just got like your 5150 half stack once you got it disengaged from the combo version. So now, well, your back will be happier, that's for sure. And apparently Lawrence comments, it's a pixie dust, werewolf spit, and vampire tears.
Oh, see, they were out of stock when I went to go get that.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Sam. So
That's how he mods other pedals too, right? You send him a pedal, he just sprinkles the above on the existing components, just
Is that
slaps the back
Chinese?
on it, sends it back to you, and it sounds better.
Is that Chinese pixie dust or is that Russian pixie dust?
Ah, yes.
It matters.
Modern Vintage says there's a difference between the versions, so when buying any at high prices, yeah, be careful and do research first. Sure. Well, you want to make sure they're legit, first of all.
You know, right now, vintage tubes of that are unobtainium. Most of the tubes you find on the secondary market nowadays are pulls or new old. Very, very few of them are real new old stock. They're seconds and pulls. They just aren't out there. I mean, they haven't made them for 40 years. Why do you think you're going to find some big stash of them? You're just not.
Yeah. Yeah, like literally, you're probably better off finding that, like going to a flea market and there's that one guy with the box under the table covered in dust still that he's been lugging to the flea market year after year, as opposed to finding them on an eBay or something like that.
A lot of the tubes that you find they found in the 90s and the 2000s were from like television shops that went out of business.
Yeah.
You know, and electronic shops, when they closed, they had all these things in the back that were just new old stock and they got bought out. When's the last time you've even seen a television shop? Is there any television repair shops left in the world?
No, but
I don't know of any.
I will say 10 years ago, I did know a television repairman because he actually worked for the military. And the way the technology was with modern TVs was there was a one capacitor that would go out in them after 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah.
And so all of his service calls for warranty repairs was he'd pop off the back, pull out one capacitor, replace it, good to go.
Yeah, and a lot of the capacitors were they were pirated. They were taking parts that were thrown in the dumpster, putting a new covering on them because they're just shrink wrap.
Yep.
And selling them as brand new parts to the manufacturers, so they put them in there thinking they bought brand new top quality parts when they bought stuff that came out of the dumpster.
Yeah, and it made me wonder who's even making TVs anymore, because he was doing RCA, LG, and Samsung, and it was basically the same capacitor in all of them.
Yeah.
So are they all buying the same circuit board off said manufacturer and then putting their own housing?
Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. Power supplies are one of the biggest problems when it comes to electrical noise. So getting those approved for the FCC is a real problem. That's why everything runs off wall warts, because all you have to do is get one approved and then put different ends on it for different devices, and you've got one size fits all. Well, the same thing works for things that plug directly into the wall. There's one power supply that has different ways to activate different voltages, and it's approved, and then you just buy it and put it in there, and you don't have to worry about getting your FCC certification.
Right. What's up, Doug Strong? Doug was doing the Bob Vila portion of our Zoom call on Saturday. He took us along for a repair on his toilet. It was great. And then John built a pedal board in front of us all, so good times. And you can be a part of that. Click the join button down below. Become a channel member. Exclusive content and twice a month Zoom hangs with folks like us. Jim's a regular, and we get to pick his brain all the time on this stuff. And it's great because it seems like, Jim, we all bring our little, because we all delve into something. Like, you're a little more into amps. I'm a little more into pedals. Some other guys are more into guitars. And between that, we can pretty much convince anybody to buy anything, I think. But with expert advice.
It's always nice to have a friend who you can just call up and say, hey, this is what's going on. Should I be worried, or what do you think I should look at? Is this just a tube needs replacing? I realized after I bought my first tube amp and fell absolutely in love with the sound that these were going to get really expensive if I didn't learn to fix them. So I went and learned to fix them.
What's up, Hobo Roadie? And we did find out it's official Disney pixie dust, apparently. Whew,
Disney pixie dust, yeah.
Yeah.
That's proprietary. I couldn't get a hold of that.
He probably picks up a barrel of it every time he goes out to a NAMM show, right? Because it's right across the street. So you just
probably
get a barrel, send it on home. That's right. Ann Ferd had a water buffalo hat during the call. And car stories from Josh. Yes.
Yes, car stories from Josh.
With unique cooling systems. Not every day you see exhaust tubing used on a cooling system. Just saying.
Works.
Other than a Fiero. Let's run the cooling lines right along the frame rails onto the bottom so they can ride out in 3.5 years because of salt on the roads.
Nowadays, they make everything out of that, out of stainless steel. So when's the last time you've had to put a muffler on a car?
Oh, well, I know the last time I did it, the exhaust on a car, it cost me almost $3,000 at a deal. And the worst part was the tips cost $800 because they're welded on. And without them, your exhaust ends like 8 inches too short. And you know you're going to rot out the whole rear bumper area if you have them from your vapors in the winter. So you have to have the tips go all the way to the end. Bastards. And nobody bends an exhaust anymore. They just buy components. Like all they are is parts replacers. They're not really mechanics per se anymore. Used to be a guy who just like angle it up. You go over to the bender, crank it out. One single piece, you know.
But you needed a new exhaust every 3-4 years in a car back then because they made it out of that cheap steel and they bent the tubes.
And you might as well drop the gas tank while you're at it anyways because it's going to be rotten within 10 years.
Yeah.
Always on the seam. So then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I guess I'm only getting half tanks of gas going forward.
Yeah, it's amazing how some of these businesses that were on every corner are gone now completely. You know, there was a television repair shop in every town, you know, back in the day.
Yep.
There was
the saddest for me was working for Napa, delivering exhaust systems to Midas. And I'm like, you are an exhaust shop. Like, we should be getting stuff from you. You know? Did not make any sense.
Yeah. At least
Josh still bends his own exhaust. Good.
Yeah.
John DeShane's like, okay, back
don't even have the pipe bender anymore to do it. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, get rid of the bender. You can put another car in another bay.
Yeah.
So, speaking of tubes, John, why not? Okay, so what is a 6550 or 6505? Like, what are those?
6550. Yes. 6550 is the next step up from a 6L6.
Okay.
As time went on, you know, after they developed the original 6L6, which was a metal tube, it had a metal case on it, not glass. The 6L6 GC was the first one with the glass. Then there was the 6L6 GB, which became the 5881. Then there was the 6L6 GC, which is the one that most people use every day.
Right.
It's the C. And each revision of the tube has carried more and more and more current, so it puts out more and more wattage.
Makes sense.
Okay, the final revision became 6550. The difference between the 6L6 GB and the 5881 is one's a mil-spec tube and one is not. The 5881 was the military number for it. 6550 is the military number for that tube that's the step up from the 6L6 GC. And it was developed for the military originally.
And that's why Michael Krause, he says, so why do 5881 seem to last so long? If they're built to military spec, they're going to last. Yep.
But nowadays, nothing's built to military specs. It's barely built to specs.
Yeah.
So if you can, the nice thing is where you'll never find, you know, old EL34s and 6L6s, you can still occasionally run across some old 5881s.
That would be nice.
Yeah. When I bought my my Fender amp, it still had an original set of Townsall 5881s that Fender put in it, dated 1960.
Nice.
Yeah, it had
Michael Krause, he answered as I was typing. I love it.
And It had a full set of Bugle Boy preamp tubes in it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, all they were the EL whatever. I forget what the European number was, but they were all mil spec tubes in that amp. That Leo Fender did that. He wanted his amps to last, so he put all mil spec tubes in his stuff.
Oh, here's a question from Ferd. He says, I use one of those little hybrid lunchbox amps from Joyo. It's got a 12AX7 preamp and a solid state power amp. Opinions? Mm-hmm. You won't hurt my feelings.
Does it sound good?
Exactly.
That's what I care about. I'm not hung up on the technology. If it sounds good, it is good. I've heard those amps and they sound
they're cheap. Yeah, I thought they sounded pretty cool. What's up, Gary Junkie 35 and Brother Tom? I knew it was only a matter before Bent Tom was going to jump into this tube conversation.
One-trick ponies is the only deal. You're not going to buy one that gives you great cleans and then, turn it up and it gives you this wonderful distortion. That's not how they're made. They're pretty well locked onto their sound. You'll get the one that's designed for hard rock and you get the one that's designed for cleans, and that's what they are. But, I mean, considering their size and the amount of money you spend on them, they're a hell of a good deal.
Well, exactly. I would say, John DeShane's like, just don't try and service it. You don't need to, because you could go through 10 of them before you've paid for a full tube head.
The nice thing about them is they're really efficient, because the power amp section's a Class D amplifier, which is a switching amplifier.
Mm-hmm.
It uses switching to produce the different outputs, and it doesn't waste electricity. So you're getting a lot of bang for a little buck, and they're great. You get the tube warmth from the preamp, and you get efficiency from the Class D power amp.
Nice. Looks like Ryan Hall reported in. He made it to Alabama. Sweet.
Woo!
Hug Mom for us. Because it's better that you hug her than us. Because she'd be like, why are all these strange men hugging me?
I like it.
Well, you can just say it's all my brothers, because Ryan calls everyone his brother. See, right there, Charles 75. Howdy, brother. With the smiley emoji with a Sans Western hat, Sure. I get it.
I don't know if I'd call myself a guru, Terry. I'm just more of a hobbyist who's kind of taking it one step beyond, I guess.
Yeah, well, compared to us that don't know.
Sure. The real gurus are the people like Dave Friedman and that. John Surra, those guys really know their stuff. They'd make me look sad.
Lawrence is a bit of a guru. Don't let him.
Yeah, I think Lawrence, I'd consider a guru too.
Yeah, he knows stuff.
Although I studied with Bruce Egnater. I mean, I've taken all his classes, his advanced classes. I've talked to him about things. I mean, while he's got a lot more experience than I do, I know many of the same things.
See, guru of the community. Just saying it.
Bruce Egnater's brilliant. I mean,
and a super nice guy, he seems. Super nice.
Tremendous. If you ever get a chance to take one of his amp courses, I highly recommend it. You spend the weekend in Detroit, but the first day you'll build an amp, and then at the end of that day, he brings them all up and gets them all working. And then the next day he goes over it and shows you all the modifications you can do and what each circuit does and how to change the amp into something different. So he gives you the platform to modify. It's really cool.
Bent Tom's at the point he can't do solid state. Even my vinyl stereo is tube amplified. Fine. Then Scott Brockway says, but Tom, all your pedals are solid state. But then I'm waiting for Tom to reply, you assume I still use any of my pedals. So we'll see how that goes.
Yes, but
he has all the H9, so I assume he's using an H9 at some point. He's got 4 of them.
That's really a computer.
Modern Vintage asks, what other classes does Bruce Egnater have?
He has, every once in a while, he runs the advanced class, which is strictly just him teaching and allowing you to ask questions and learn more advanced topics. But, I mean, he's been involved with so many things. Most of the stuff that you guys never knew he did. I've forgotten half the stuff he's done, but he's been involved with radio and all kinds of different companies.
Yeah.
I still use an RM50 head. That's my number one amp. And I use the amp modules. Nowadays, that's that new, what's that new technology he's got?
The Synergy modules.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's become Synergy. And it's still a wonderful technology. It's a great idea.
Terry updated. Welcome all to the Sunday Night Hang with Ben Coombs and special guest guru / hobbyist / enthusiast Jppagetoo. Perfect.
Thanks, Terry.
I like it. Apparently, Tom has a whole foot locker full of tubes, and he's not willing to share. We'll see.
I've got
Tom.
boxes of them downstairs. I criticize tube rolling, but I have my own huge collection of tubes, vintage and otherwise.
Apparently, Lawrence has a box of them. Great. All right.
If you really want to find old tubes, the best way to do it is go to yard sales and find old televisions and stuff to scrap out because they've got a lot of old tubes in them that are really still good.
Hip Metalworks wants to check out some Synergy stuff. I witnessed it. That's all. I didn't actually try it. I watched JJ try it.
When I was working with Bruce, he demonstrated something that absolutely floored me. He everybody talks about what's the difference between, an AC30, a Marshall, and a Fender. You know what it turned out that had the biggest effect on sound?
Other than speaker?
The tone stack.
That makes sense. It's all about the tone stack.
Stacks are different in those amps, and those had more of an effect on how those amps sounded than anything else. You could take the tone stack from an AC30 and put it in the Marshall circuit, and it sounded like an AC30. It was incredible. He had a box that he could switch between the different
makes sense
tone stacks.
I've always been aware of tone stacks. I found for a while there, for the sounds that I was trying to get, sup, Scott? Oh, meant to tag Tom. That's okay. I get it. Both of us are BE. I get it. Because believe me, I've tagged myself many a chat trying to talk to Tom. And people are like, why are you tagging yourself? Why are you tagging yourself? It's like lifestyle choices. But anyways.
I like myself.
Yeah, exactly. I'm talking to myself. Can't you tell?
It's the only place I can get intelligent conversation anymore.
Right? Yeah, I remember for a while I was looking for a Marshall head, and I couldn't dial in a tone, and I realized it was where they had stacked the mids. I didn't like. I needed them. They needed to be shifted. Because that was when I was playing with One Day to Live. Because Marshall half stack was going to be on stage, perfect, but all they had were like, I don't know even what they're JCM 2000s or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was like,
those are a hard one to dial in.
Yeah. And I'm looking at, it's got all the channels. So they've got like 14,000 knobs on the front. I'm like, no, do you just have like a JCM 800? Wow, there's one of the channels. No. I don't want an amp with 3 channels I'm never going to use.
Exactly. But it would absolutely shock me that the tone stack had that much of effect. You'd think with all the different topologies they talk about, and it's got a pentode first stage. Nope. It was the tone stack that made such a huge difference. Matter of fact, if you look in those modules and look at the schematics of Bruce's modules, the biggest difference between all of them is the tone stacks in them.
Makes sense. Yes, that's right, James. A 10-band EQ does work great.
It does.
I don't have much experience with EQs. That's something I'm planning on pursuing this year. Marshall Murray's here. Good to see you.
Didn't Gilmore use a big EQ? Wasn't he a big fan of using those 10-band EQs?
I do believe so.
Anything Gilmore does, I'm down.
And should we talk about all of his rack gear that he has? I don't know where that falls. Is that digital, solid state? What are we talking about?
Rack, Tom, I'm here for you, brother. I'm here for you. I'm a tube guy.
I do recall he said on, I think it was on New Year's, he said he's getting rid of 80% of his gear this year.
I
We
don't know
shall
who he
see.
is. I don't know you anymore.
I'll be
Yeah, I
curious to
stopped
see it.
collecting gear. About 6 or 7 years ago, I realized I had enough of everything I needed to make music with, and I don't need anymore. You need
No,
more
I
gear,
just
Ben.
wait for it to find me. That's my key. I just wait for it to find me, and unfortunately, it's been finding me more often than not because we already
Oh, you.
got one guitar in this year, and apparently, I'm picking up another one tomorrow.
Oh, nice. What you getting?
Yeah, I have no idea. A friend messaged. A friend messaged me, and all he said was, "I have one guitar left, and I want to give it to you." And similar to Tom, he's getting rid of a lot of his possessions. And I'm not sure exactly why. I think there may be some health reasons involved, and he's trying to simplify life. And so I'm going to go over to his place tomorrow and have a visit, at the very least. Someone I used to work with years ago, and we've always maintained a friendship. So
Well,
he's one of the guys that got me back into playing because I used to go hang out at his place, and I'd be grabbing that J Tercer over there off his wall all the time and noodling on it over at his place.
I've got a friend who I bought my current Gibson from, and they want it back. And I keep telling them, anytime you want it, I told you when you sold it to me, I'd sell it back to you for what you sold it to me for. But they never seem to come and get it. So
Thanks,
I even
Josh.
told them they didn't even have to have the money. I'd take their word for it, and they still wouldn't take it back.
Apparently, Tom says 6.5 stacks is just too many.
For who? Not for me.
I don't know. That sounds like an epic backline to me. That would be cool.
That sounds like Dolby.
I think that sounds like Bo's house. I don't know. I bet you Bo has 6.5 stacks around his place.
No, I mean if you configured that right, that'd be like Dolby amps.
Right. 6.1 round.
Yeah, exactly. 2 on the sides, 1 in each corner, and then all he needs is like
We'll just lay the hat stack down in the middle facing up for omnipresent.
A wet, dry, wet, wet, dry, wet, dry amp.
Yep.
We love you, Tom.
Doug Strong's like, don't listen to him, Tom. I'm with you. Hey. Now, Doug, who we heard moan and complain for 6 months of wanting this one pedal, and then he gets it, and then he jumps on the call. He's like, so I've been plugging directly into my amp lately.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for him to pay me off when he buys that next pedal.
Right. Yes, the bet was set.
I almost had him talked into buying another pedal on that same talk.
Almost. What's up, Absolute Mayhem? Patrick Zed. He says EQs and a BBE Sonic Stomp. Sure.
Works for me.
I missed that.
Here.
Wow. No wonder that amp's so expensive. Modern Vintage says, did you catch my comment on the amount of tubes in the new Two-Rock Joey Landreth amp? 13 tubes.
Oh my God.
That explains why it retails for $8,000 US. Half that cost is tubes.
Well, my Fender has 8, and it's a 1-channel amp.
Wow.
Yeah, it uses 5 for the vibrato.
Sure. I would think you would only need 1, but sure.
It's the most it's truly a vibrato amp. It changes pitch. It's the only one Fender ever made that would truly fit that. The signal comes in, it splits the highs and the lows down different paths, and then delays them differently to give you this harmonic tremolo that's just the most juicy thing you've ever heard in your life. That's the only reason to buy a brown face amp is to get that tremolo.
I bet. Sounds like it. And Doug does comment, yes, there's exactly 1 pedal I would consider this year, and if it happens, Jim, I'll send you some reparations. John DeShane just wants to throw it out there. He's got 9 tubes in his amp.
Yep.
Okay. Tom's twin reverb has 10. Okay. That probably also explains why they weigh all the weight. How does a combo amp weigh the same as a half stack? 10 fucking
Well, have
tubes.
you ever picked up a 5150 combo amp?
Right?
Oh my God.
Ridiculous.
I think they weigh close to 90 pounds.
I was going to say 85, 87.
Yeah, it's insanity.
Yeah.
They got two 12-inch speakers in it. Plus, they got these transformers that are this big. It's all iron. And they're built cheap as hell.
Now that's an interesting question. Modern Vintage says for Jim, good, because I couldn't answer this. How hard is it to integrate tube tremolo / vibrato into a tube amp?
Not difficult at all if you're going to do it from use a bias tremolo. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Most of the blackface Fenders use the bias tremolo, where we apply a varying voltage to the bias on the power tubes.
Right.
And you can easily do that by making an oscillator of some sort with a tube and applying that to do what the brown face does.
Mm-hmm.
No way. Even Fender gave that up.
Right.
I mean, they only lasted 2.5 years of making that, and then they went on to the blackface and went straight to that new tremolo, the bias tremolo, where they use the optical circuit.
Right.
Which sounds great.
Where is it? Lawrence said, how about the red knob twin, 115 pounds? Yeah.
Oh, God. Yes, that's one.
Scott Brockway says, I decided what you need is a tube face 90. Sure. Yes. I would probably very much enjoy that. Modern Fiction says, what tubes are found in older TVs?
All sorts of different ones. Most of them have nothing to do with audio. Most of them, depending on how old the TV is. If you're talking ones from the early 60s, then they used some standard tubes that you may be able to reuse in audio applications. And certainly all the tubes that did all the audio output for a TV can be reused. But if you're looking at TVs from around 1970 through 75 that were made with tubes, they used something called compactrons, where they took a whole bunch of different tubes and stuck them in one glass envelope. Those are crazy. Some of those are useful and some of them are not. None of them have generally gone on to be used in tube amps, because the ones that were used traditionally have worked so well and were designed for audio applications. I mean, a lot of the tubes that are in TVs are designed for very high frequency use and just aren't really efficient at doing audio. If you want to see how many tubes are out there, go look at there's a place online that has all the different names of all the different tubes and has all the tube sheets.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see all their specs. There's an amazing variety out there.
Modern Venture says, justifying the 8K price, the Joey amp has a bias tremolo and a harmonic tremolo, like the Victoria Reverberato.
Okay.
So it's got all the tremolo in it. Yeah. Well, that would explain it then. Yeah. Okay.
I haven't looked at that amp. I'll have to go give that a look. Not that
I think it was just released in the last week or two or something.
Okay. Joey Landreth? Is that who it was?
Yeah, Joey Landreth.
Okay. I know who he is.
The latest pride out of Winnipeg, we'll say.
It's a good player.
Yeah.
Well, it can't be any worse than that John Mayer monstrosity out of Paul Reed Smith.
Never heard of him. No.
Yeah, he's popular with the girls. The chicks dig him.
Yep. Guitar Man 45 says, my dad had boxes and boxes of tubes. None of them were for guitar amplifications. Think for TVs. Yeah, same here. I gave away a couple boxes of tubes to a buddy of mine in high school because I didn't see a point of having them. I was going solid state because everything was solid state, and I didn't realize that people were still using tube amps, really, and I couldn't service tube if I wanted to. You couldn't get tubes around here. I think I had to special order them through the music store, and it was ridiculous. Like, $80 for a 6L6 in the late 80s. I'm like,
I got like 8 huge boxes full of tubes meant for radio and television and everything. If you design for a lot of them, they're useful. You can make amps with them,
yep,
but you have to completely design your amps from the ground up to use them that way.
right.
To be useful for that, how that tube was designed to be used.
Mm-hmm.
And, why bother? That's kind of where I'm at with it. Why bother?
Tom's dropping knowledge of all the history of all the heaviest amps, combo amps ever made, I think. If it's not over 100 pounds, he's not listing it. That's fine. Hello, Barry. He says, we used the Zenith TV to heat our living room growing up.
Oh,
yeah.
God, yes.
Right?
Some of those big, huge TV consoles in the mid 70s, man, you couldn't air condition your house when those things were on.
Nope.
But if
nothing like turning on a TV that's been sitting around for a while and you just smell the dust burning off of it.
If you can find some of those old consoles, grab them, because inside of them are wonderful audio amps that are easily turned into guitar amps.
Yes.
I mean, simply you just pull out the chassis and change a few things here and there, and you're on your way, and you got a great sounding guitar amp.
Sure.
Most of them were designed to use 6V6s because that was, let's face it, 15 watts was pretty damn loud. They used X7s. They're great amps.
Let's see here. Where did I see that? Boom. Dean comments, I just checked the weight on my PV Delta Blues 115. Great amp. Just under 50 pounds. First and only tube amp I have. Pretty good deal at $300. Hell yeah.
No kidding. That's a great deal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been a dark horse killer on the blues scene for ages. Like, that thing. Oof. Yeah.
PV made great equipment back in the day.
Yep.
It wasn't until, about 10 years ago when they decided they were going to ditch the union and move everything overseas that things went to hell for PV. They even made some good guitars.
Oh, yeah. Like, great bang for the buck. Great bang for the buck, that company.
I mean, back in the 70s and 80s, everybody had PVPA systems.
Yeah. And there's solid state stuff because they did it and did it well. Like, even when I was I'm looking over there because my power amps for the PA are still PVs.
Yeah.
Because that's what my dad used, and same as got a pair of PV PA speakers and, I had to buy a pair of Black Widows to put in them, but why not? They were not cheap, but I found out Black Widows these days are Kevlar impregnated speaker cones, and I'm like, that'll last. That'll last.
Well, PV made stuff for the working musician, somebody who needed something to do the job and, go out and play a gig and
they ruled the roost in this area. Like, yes, there was a Fender dealer and there was a handful of guys playing through Fender amps, but I remember when Dad was gigging in the 80s, because it was all country, it was just a wash of PV backline.
PV dominated country.
Which I always got a kick of because I always thought the PV logo always looked so heavy metal to me. But you'd only see it in country acts. And I'm just like, what?
Yeah. And who was it? Leonard Skinner that had the all PV backline for years?
Yeah, they were one of the first endorsees of PV. Yeah.
I hate to say it, but I thought they sounded damn good.
Yeah, nobody's ever put on Skinner record and go, oh, this sounds like crap.
Yeah.
If anything, that would you think, actually, it's funny how many albums you go back and listen to from the 70s and you're like, oh, it's a really good, but man, that guitar tone sucks. And it's not because it's sitting in the mix right. It's because it sucks. Because you've heard much better guitar tone by the 80s and still sat in the mix. But, but Skinner, man, that's a great guitar tone.
Yeah, they always sounded great.
Holds up. I always noticed that Dean sitting in, seat watching, going to shows that my dad was a part of, and his dad's amp always stood out on stage because I think at that time, he was still using a PV Classic 30 or 50, but in tweed, and it was the only tweed amp on stage. Everyone else had PV black Tolex everywhere, and I was like, wow, there's Dad's amp, because they'd set up everybody's backline together on the big stage or whatever. And
sure.
which I always thought, because then I thought, wow, this is no different than watching, like you watch an award show or, someone's birthday or anniversary, and it's one of those, by the end of the show, you got 14 guitar players all taking lead breaks on stage, most of which are all playing a Strat of some kind. And Jimmy Vaughn's there. Jimmy Vaughn is always there. Jimmy Vaughn is always there. And I thought same thing, because Dad would do these union benefit shows to raise money for local musicians union, and they'd put all the gear out on stage first because it was a big old theater, fill up the back line, house drum kit, couple steel guitars up there.
The back line is what made Fender famous. I mean, every club owned a Fender Twin, so that the touring musician in his car could just show up, plug into the Twin, and do his gig and leave.
Yep. Have a good one, Lawrence. Talk to you soon, my friend.
Now, there's a heavy amp.
Yeah.
Fender Twin with 212s. Oh, my God.
Mm-hmm. Dean says, my old rock band from the 80s, we had PV speakers, amps, and mixer board. Yeah. Well, it was great because they had the powered mixers, too. Fucking weighed a ton. Yeah. But it was great. It was like a studio console because they were so big. I remember we had one in high school, too, which was the same board as my dad's used. So when I joined the sound crew, they're like, so what, do you know anything about this? I'm like, I already know how to use that board. It's like, really? He sat down, boom. So I've been playing with one of them since I was 11. No problem. What's up, Nikki?
Nikki Tedesco in the chat. Managed to market themselves to schools and everything else because they were everywhere.
Here, the Ardens had the school board deal through the 80s into the 90s. So one of the reasons, everything was full, and because you used to go in, it's 1,000, marked down to 800, because 800 was the trade price that everybody charged, but MSRP nobody actually charged. Go into their store in the 80s, they charged full MSRP because that's what they charged the school boards on everything.
Yeah.
And and they couldn't discount it otherwise. So it's like, all right, I guess. And then they changed that eventually because they got sick of hearing, well, I'll just drive up to Oshawa and go to Long McQuaid. I'll just go up to Oshawa, because gas not being, it's only an hour up the highway. I'll go up there, And they got, so they're like $5 price matching.
It's worth driving.
Exactly. So yeah, it was PV. We had SP2s for the PA system for the high school even.
Yeah, and they made those speaker stands, with the sat up on tripods, and they were everywhere.
Oh, they were great.
Yeah, sounded good.
Yeah, bulletproof 15 and a horn, perfect.
Yeah, and with solid state amps, you can run them without a load, and they're not going to blow up.
Yep.
So
yeah, I remember
Dad-proof too.
Dad commenting on that. He goes, I love having this PV board when you joined the band in the 80s, and I didn't really get it. And then, he was telling me stories. He'd be like, do you know why sets are 45 minutes? I said, no, Dad. He says, because after 45 minutes, your PA was overheating to the point where the sound kept getting quieter and quieter. So you had to take a 15-minute break for it to cool down. And then you could go back, play another 45 minutes before the PA would start getting quieter and quieter.
Wow, I didn't know that. That makes sense.
Well, I was like, oh, okay.
I grew up
nobody ever replaced tubes in the ramps. The number one thing you always replaced was your transformer because you didn't know what voltage you were ever plugging into.
Yeah. Now everything's multi-voltage.
Yep. Yeah, he'd get 3 years out of a transformer gigging. It's just like, okay, Dad. And John says, because after 45 minutes, I got to pee. Yeah, that's right, Barry. John Fogerty did rock Solid State Custom. They were basically the custom endorsees in many ways. They had the whole backline provided.
I think that was about an artist guitar tone that was shit. There you go.
mean, well, yeah, my dad likes it. He goes, yeah, you know. I'm like, how
I
much
love the
gain?
music.
You know, Fogarty. I'm like, that's. I hope you're meeting up around the bend at least. You know, at least we can dig in a bit, or you know, Susie Q or something. He's like, yeah, Susie Q. That's it. I'm like, all right, or Green River.
But his guitar tone was not the best.
No, it sounds like a clean solid state amp at many times. So I'm like,
Yeah,
I know that tone. That's testing out a guitar in the music store tone.
yeah. That's a Leo Fender would love it tone.
Yeah, Leo, let's put a solid state preamp and then a tube power amp in an amp. Again, Leo.
Leo was always after the most loudest clean tone he could get.
Yeah.
He totally misunderstood the concept of distortion. He just didn't get it.
Or it didn't want it too, right? That was the other thing.
Well,
Why
he was
would
a
anybody
country
want
music
it?
fan. Country music at that time didn't use distortion.
No, exactly.
You know.
Yeah, can I get that direct to mixer board sound? That's what I'm looking for.
I mean, he was doing stuff for pedal steel players and for, you know, country artists who were trying to sound like they were playing acoustic instruments, but still had to be heard in the dance hall.
Exactly, Scott, because Leo loved country.
Leo was a country music fan, without a doubt.
Yeah.
It wasn't until he got a hold of who's the surf guy that he did so much. He made the Showman for him.
Dick Dale.
Dick Dale. It wasn't until he started working with Dick Dale that he finally understood what rock and roll artists were looking for.
Yep.
If you ever listen to any of the stories Dick Dale told about Leo Fender, they're funny. About Leo would build him an amp and he'd bring it back the next day all blown up. Leo had to come out and see what the hell he was doing to blow up all his amps.
Yeah. Well, that was like
pounding on the E string.
One of the funniest stories I had heard was Ronnie Montrose. You know, to get the rock candy sound, you know, he's just diming like a champ, right, to get that tone. But it was so hard on the speakers. He carried 2 to 3 amps on tour with him because they were constantly sending the speakers back to get reconed every 2 weeks.
Wow.
He was getting 2 weeks out of a speaker before it ripped apart. And then but it's that sound.
Yeah.
So
back in the day, he used to insist on a new set of power tubes in his Marshalls every gig.
Perfect.
Yeah. Insanity. You know how many great tubes that boy threw out?
Yeah, all the good ones, basically.
It's just nowadays you just cry. You say, "No, Ronnie, give them to me. I'll take your old stock." Yeah. So,
well, it's like where's he talking today about his vintage Marshall head? He's like, I was able to find this one, and it's clean. No one's messed with it. It's like, right, exactly. No one's messed with it. He's lucky.
Yeah, when I found this Fender amp, I bought it at Elderly Music here in Lansing. And it just appeared one day on their used stuff, and I'd been looking for a Fender concert. And when I went down and looked at it, I couldn't take it apart to see what was inside. So I went down and played it. Saw it was in beautiful condition. I looked at the tube chart, and it said it was September of '60. So I bought it and brought it home. And I pulled the chassis out. Nothing had been changed on that amp since the day it left the factory.
Perfect.
On top of that, it was kind of a transitional amp. It was built on the 4-tube vibrato board, but used a 5-tube vibrato. So he actually bastardized the circuit on the circuit board to build this amp. That's typical Leo.
Yeah.
I mean, he put the wrong tube chart on an amp because he didn't want to throw the tube charts out. I mean,
yep.
So, and on top of that, I had it sent out to a guy to like I said, I had this whole amp checked out when I first got it, including all the caps. I just wanted to be sure. And it was such a bizarro amp, you know, I wanted to be sure that somebody hadn't monkeyed with it, but I couldn't see where they had. And, when he looked at it, he was a kind of a Fender expert. He goes, this amp's really weird. Really weird. He says none of the values are the same as you see in any of the schematics. And he says it's all original. I said, yeah, I know. I said, I don't see a solder joint that's been touched.
Nice. Billy says, didn't Dwayne Allman use a brown face concert?
Most of the time he used a Marshall, but I don't know what he would. Back when he was probably down there at Fame Studios, he probably used a bit of everything.
Sure. I'm not sure.
See, the thing that people don't understand is all those Brown amps are the same amp. They just have different speaker outputs.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are a 1x15, which was the Pro, and then there's a 2x12, and then there's a 3x12, and then mine, the Concert's a 4x10. It's actually the carry-on to a 59 Bassman. If you look in there, it uses the exact same output transformer as a 59 Bassman.
Billy says first special work.
Yeah. I mean, if it's a 59 Bassman with pink Tolex on it, is what it is. And a 59 Bassman, they go through the moon. Nobody knows about these concerts.
Barry asks, can we discuss the death cap? I don't know what a death cap is.
It deals with how the amp is grounded.
Okay.
Fender used all 2-wire grounding. They didn't have a third wire. Mine has only 2 wires. I haven't changed it away from the 2-wire grounding. Legally, if I wanted to take this amp out, I'd have to change it, but I won't. I don't bastardize amps unless they have to be bastardized. I just can't bring myself to do it. When you do go to a 3-wire grounded system, you have to cut a cap so that it doesn't feed back and electrocute you.
That makes sense.
So that's what the cap of death's all about. It's
Gotcha.
part of the process of changing from 2-wired to 3-wired system.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've got a few 2-wire amps around here.
Yeah, I won't take that amp if I'm going to go anywhere near a microphone. I've zapped myself with it. No fun. 110, 20 volts through my lips, just no fun at all. See, I have to be careful.
My progress says, I'm not going to put out an amp where people are going to die because they put the plug into the outlet backwards. That's why he has the 2 ons. You got a 50-50 chance.
Yeah. But see, as long as you're not going to ground yourself to anything, it's no big deal. If you're going to play on carpet with shoes on and not be next to a microphone, you'll never know the difference. Now, if you're going to play in barefoot in the rain and next to a microphone, you might want to reconsider that.
Yeah. Then you want all the grounding.
When it comes to fixing these old amps, if you really want one with 3-wire ground, buy one with it. There's plenty of them out there that have been fixed and doctored. I got one that's all original. It's only going to be all original one time. As soon as I change something on it, it's never going to go back. So I consider myself to be a custodian of this amp. I'm taking care of it for the next guy who's going to come along and go, oh my God, a 60 Fender that hasn't been fucked with.
Right. Bonamassa would be happy.
But I understand where guys get one and they want to gig it because they sound great.
Yep.
This amp ain't that. This amp is a very rare model. And it's got the pink Tolex, the early Tolex on it that turned pink. It's got the dark maroon grill cloth, which is before they went to the wheat grill cloth in late 60. It's just this amp that there aren't very many of them.
Right.
And so I don't want to mess with it. If
Totally
I can keep playing it on the original caps with the original plug and everything else, that's what I do.
So my question to you is, I still haven't done it yet, but I was thinking about doing a video on the Baldwin Professional back there. Solid state, mind you. That amp, I'm pretty sure, has not been turned on since 1997.
Okay.
So I figured that would be an interesting video. Just turn it on and see what happens.
There's actually some things you could do. I'll talk to you offline, and I, I may be able to send you something that'll keep you from blowing the amp up and burning it up.
Well,
That's
that'd be
simple.
nice.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
trick
because Dad
that
would be happy. Yeah,
what
that's
I have is a board that I made that has an outlet on the top and a light socket with a light bulb. And what happens is you plug the amp into the socket on the board, and then
Mhm.
you run the power through the light bulb, and the light bulb acts as a current limiter. So if you've got a short in the amp, it can't draw more current than the bulb will allow. So if you got a 20-watt bulb, it can only draw 100 milliamps,
Right.
and then the bulb will glow bright. And if it tries to pull more than that, it'll pop the bulb and not burn up your amp. It's pretty easy to make one. You can make
Mhm.
one for $10. Or I could put it in a box and send it off to you and let you try it and use
Yeah,
it.
I thought it'd be interesting. I remember messing around with it in the 90s, and Dad was just like, don't put any distortion through it. You'll fuck up the speakers. I'm like, okay, Dad.
Yeah. But, the distortion is a very complex waveform, and it is really hard on speakers that are dry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the one thing you
That's
might
what
want to try to do is put that in an environment where there's a little moisture to get a little bit of moisture in those speakers, so they're a little bit more supple, so that they can take being used again.
Mm-hmm.
Clean the dust out of it. Open it up, look at the electrolytic caps. Are they leaking? You'll be able to see if you look at the ends, you'll be able to see the gook coming out of them.
Yeah,
If you got gook coming out of them, that amp ain't ready to be played yet. They need to be
exactly.
replaced. So, just a good visual inspection of the circuit and, a little bit of care. My bet is that amp will fire up just fine unless you have electrolytic caps that have gone bad.
Doug Strong says, I fixed a control panel for a customer and electrocuted myself, showing him the relay I had to replace. Like a boss.
That's
Love it.
Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah, love it. Yeah, that's and for those who don't know, that's the same model amp that Willie Nelson's been gigging for decades. So if it's
They're
gonna go
really
anywhere.
good. I have a solid state amp here. I built in, gosh, it had to be 1978. I built a Heathkit solid state amplifier. My aunt bought it for me, so when I learned to play guitar, I'd have an amp. She bought it
Mm-hmm.
for me and said, "Here you go. Here's your amp." And I looked at this and I'm going, "What the hell is this?" I put it together. I put the whole amp together myself, and it worked the first time out.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I was thinking about it, like, I'm curious to hear what the cleans would sound like on that. It might be a totally different sound for me, and God knows that circuit's not being used anymore, I'm sure. So
And to be honest, those speakers are probably nothing special. They're probably just a standard set of ceramic speakers that are
yeah.
crap.
Yeah.
So,
Like it's what, mid
the,
mid to late 60s vintage, and it's originally was a 212 keyboard amp
yeah.
originally.
And I can't imagine that Baldwin went out and sourced Jensen's for it or something.
No. That's
Here's
my
another
guess.
tip for you guys out there looking for cool things. Jens, back in the 60s, remember those projectors they used to have at the schools? Well, they used to make speaker extensions for those. They were just little, like, suitcase things with long wires on them that they plugged into the projector. Guess what's in those? 16 ohm Jensens.
Ooh.
They're beautiful speakers. And a lot of times nobody knows what they are, so you can find them on auction sites or elsewhere for $10 a piece. Try to find a 1960s Jensen, anything that works.
Like that?
No. Hang on, I'll go grab mine and I'll show it to you. Be right back.
I don't know what's in this. Hard to say, Tom. Hard to say. I don't know. Oh, this one's got a drink ring on the top. Perfect. That adds the value about 14%. Looks like it's made out of mahogany or something. Probably not. No idea. Slot head screws holding this thing in, so you know it's old. Actually, I think this might be a Baldwin speaker. Do I have something I can open? It does, doesn't it, Trev? Oh. Oh, yes.
Like that.
Okay. More than welcome, Modern Vintage. All right, this is going to be a separate video figuring this out because I don't have a slot head screwdriver on me. I think, Jim, this is a Baldwin speaker cab out of a school PA system. And this, I got, the guy had hardwired this into one of these amp heads I had picked up at the time. And he literally just used a piece of it was like one electrical wire out of the wall. And he just hardwired it straight out of the speaker output directly into this. And I went,
doesn't hurt anything.
I'm like, okay. So, yes.
Those are Bell
I'm going
and
to do a
Howell.
video on this, folks. We'll open it up and see what kind of speakers inside of it and such. So,
hey, you might have found your first speaker for your old Fender.
Right?
But yeah, those old Bell and Howells, they're all full of old Jensen speakers. Most people don't even think to open them up.
All right. Well, we'll do one more question, and I like Modern Vintages here. Why not? Can Jim discuss/explain a Leslie?
Sure. Leslie's, what they are is they have a speaker that faces up. And on top of it is a rotating drum that has a horn shape that allows the sound to only go out one direction. As that rotates, the sound rotates with it. It forces the sound to go different directions. And what you get is the Doppler effect. As the speaker is rotating toward you, it increases the pitch, and as the speaker is rotating away from you, the pitch decreases. So you get this, just like a siren coming at you. That's how a Leslie works.
Interesting.
So the speaker itself, they did make ones where the actual speaker rotated as well, but those are not common because they were so complicated to keep working. It's typically just a piece of plastic that sits over the top of them that directs the sound.
Gotcha. What's up, Dwight Bailey?
Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. Makes sense to me.
I have probably a 6 foot tall by 2.5, 3 foot wide by 2 foot deep Leslie's cabinet in my basement.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, it's got a 100-watt amp in it. Unfortunately, solid state, but my problem is I got no place to put it other than down there where I'm storing it right now.
It's not something you want to be taking to gigs. I'll tell you that.
Well, it's huge. I mean, like
Right.
I said, it's 6 foot tall by 3 foot wide by 2.5 feet deep. It's huge. It's got a huge 15-inch bass speaker in the bottom, and then another set of speakers on top. It's got 2 sets of speakers in it. It's crazy.
Wow. Paul Ewing says Scotty Moore used a Bell and Howell cab. Interesting.
Yeah, that's exactly what I have right there. That's a Bell and Howell. They put Jensen speakers in the dang things.
Tom says, put the clothes in the basement. Leslie goes in your closet.
Well, okay. I'll play that one by ear. I'll take that under advice, Tom.
That's right, Billy. He says those B3 guys all travel with Leslie's. Well, if you're going to load in a B3, you might as well load in a Leslie as well.
I mean,
Steve Ray used them. Yep.
I fixed my buddy. He's got a Hammond 103 organ, which is a B3, less fancy version of a B3.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got the full Leslie with it, and I repaired the amp in his Leslie. The damn thing sounds amazing.
I bet.
And that used 6550 tubes. It's loud.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's 120 watt amp inside it.
Very cool. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap things up here, folks. And I hear somebody moving around upstairs, so I'd like to check on somebody moving around upstairs. And I appreciate everybody that tuned in tonight. I especially appreciate Jim for answering the questions, because I'd be like, I am not knowing. I'm shrugging. I don't know
some
about
good
that.
questions tonight. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, we had some great questions. Solved some myths and confirmed other legends. Perfect. That's what we do here.
I'm glad that Lawrence was here to agree with me on things.
Yeah.
Different amp people, you get different opinions. I'm a minimalist. I don't like to mess with amps and bastardize them just to make me happy.
Mm-hmm.
I treat them with reverence.
I think we'll probably do this again because, Jim and I get along well, and, he's one of the OGs of this community on this channel, I will say. We've known each other for years, chatting-wise, and gotten to know each other over the last year doing these Zoom hangs and stuff. Again, hit the join button. Become really, part of the fun.
Have a good time on those Zoom hangs.
Yeah, they are fun. And, so I'll be back tomorrow with Connects with Guitars with myself, Trev, and Terry. And then Boner Jams. What's up?
Oh, look at that.
He says, look at that shirt. The amount of a JJ's crushed weekly is unparalleled. Have a great week, everyone. Hugs and kisses. Thanks, Boner Jams. Do appreciate it. That's right, John. He says, Jim's good people. That's right. And we'll see.
I'll come back another time, and maybe when we have more questions.
Awesome. Yeah, save on the amp questions for sure. And then demand, just bring Jim back in the chat. And I'll be like, apparently, all right. And then I see, we had Jeff K says, need a replay. Bring him back soon. We will.
Thank you.
We will. And I'm glad Ty Hub, fellow Canuck, we met in Pete Thorne's chat today. And he says, Muzzle, tune in. Glad you did. Hope you enjoyed it. And Barry says, I was wondering what that shirt was. I was not going to order some for my toast. No, don't. Hit the like on your way out. Need lots of sleep for those Zoom hangs. Yep. Guitar Mania 45, they could go all night.
Take care of your dad.
And that's true, too, Scott. I will say, for all of Leo Fender's flaws, he did make his stuff to be repaired.
And last.
I
got an amp that's 70 years old, almost 70 years old, and it's still going like nobody's business.
Yep. Crazy, isn't it, folks? So have a great night. Hold those doors open. Let Billy Baloney in ahead of you in traffic, because he has places to go. Do good things, because, Cousin Doug's wife is real. And we'll see y'all tomorrow. And, of course, don't litter. Just don't. Don't.